Well, good day to you. It is July the 15th, and I hope wherever you are, you're doing well. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome everyone to Search for Signs if you are new, and welcome you back, of course, if you've heard these videos before. But whether you've heard these videos before or you're totally new and you want to know more about what I'm talking about, or if you want to see if there's any truth to this, check out the websites that I provided links for in the description portion of these videos. If you don't know anything about Maitreya and you want to know more about that, you want to know how the UFO sightings are related to this information, if you want to know how these many miracle signs are related to this information, if you go to the Share International site, that's the best website to look at first. If you wanted just a little bit of hope today, because you're kind of down and out about the world in general, check out that site. Okay, so hopefully you'll do that. It's all free. Every one of those sites are free, and they're there for you whenever you want to look into it. If you want to come back and join the discussion, I can't thank those enough for those people who post comments and post questions and email me at searchforsigns@mail.com and ask their questions that way and talk to me that way, because if it wasn't for you guys asking questions and sometimes even posting comments and me addressing your comments, I really wouldn't have much to talk about. So I do thank you for that. And look forward to more questions in the future. But anyway, I want to thank Will Seymour and who else? Healthful Livingify for your comment. Appreciate it. Now, Will, you asked a question, and I'm going to get to it in just a second. I am going to approve it, even though it has a link, but try not to put a link in a post, because it does go into my spam folder, and I got to be real careful about the links that I approve and all that stuff. But I did read the article, and I am going to post the article on the Facebook page. And if you don't have the link for the Facebook page for Search for Signs, it is in the description portion of these videos. You can check and read this article for yourself. Now, first, Will, I want to say this. I want to thank you for bringing this article to my attention. I was quite excited to read it because it was just written just a few weeks ago when they were talking about Benjamin Creme and Maitreya and the articles that Ben talked about in terms of Maitreya meeting with the BBC and so forth. And anyway, so I'll get on to your question, but I really do thank you for it, and I'd encourage people to read the article. Sure, it was wonderful. All right, did the BBC, Queen Elizabeth, and Church of England bishops choose to ignore the second coming of Christ, a.k.a. Maitreya Buddha et al., in 1986? Was it eloquently documented by, Asuan and Flutterby? After Maitreya and Jesus were both interviewed by BBC News executives many times, BBC execs became convinced and contacted the Queen, who consulted the Archbishop and other church officials, who said in about as many words, if that was really true, they would have surely come to them first. So thank you very much for that. Now, again, I just want to remind you, if you want to check out that article that he posted, go to you can either click on this link or you can go to the Facebook page and click on the link too if you want to do that. All right, now, just a point of fact, and I'm only coming from what Benjamin Creme said and what I've read about it, is Maitreya did speak with the BBC News executives in the mid-'80s. Was it 86? I don't know exactly for sure, but let's just say it was. Doesn't really matter. Now, the Master Jesus, from what I understand, was not there when he was being interviewed by the BBC. So I don't know where they got that information, but they didn't get it from Benjamin Creme's books or Share International magazine or something like that. Because from what I understand is that none of the masters who will eventually be out, known for who they are in the world, none of them will come out before Maitreya or along with Maitreya. It will be after Maitreya is known for who he is, after the day of declaration, when Maitreya introduces these masters one by one. That's when we'll start to know. This was the Master Jesus. This was the Master who was the Apostle John. This was the Master who was the Apostle Paul. This is the Master who was the Apostle Peter. And this is the Master who was Saint Germain, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And it will just be a tiny group, relatively speaking, of masters that are going to come out into the world at first. Most of them will not be taking on disciples and teaching humanity per se like a normal teacher. They'll be working with government officials, working with nations, working with the United Nations, working with artists, sculptors, city planners, those kind of things, to beautify the cities and those kind of things. Probably with people who are concerned about the environment and those kind of things. And they'll be working with them. And then there'll be teachers like the Master Jesus who will be teaching people, Maitreya who will be teaching people. Some of the other masters, like the master who was the Apostle John, will be the Master Kuthumi, will be teaching people in that kind of same way. And they'll have other roles too, but that's their main role, is to teach directly in that way. Now, so it's been said by Ben, and he made the announcement in January of 2010 that Maitreya had already started to give interviews on TV. But he wasn't using the name Maitreya. He was using a ordinary Middle Eastern name, like a Middle Eastern name like John Smith or something like that. Just totally, common name. Nothing out of the ordinary, like Maitreya. Not hinting at Maitreya, not a anagram of Maitreya. It was just some name that he was using and being introduced as an ordinary person. But the Master Jesus will not be introduced in that way, will not be talking to humanity in incognito while Maitreya is doing it too. It will just be Maitreya, is from what I understand it. So I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just telling you what I've read from Benjamin Creme. But I was quite excited to read that article. And I think it's great that they were putting it out there to whoever they're putting it out there to. So hopefully a lot of people will read that article. But anyway, were the BBC officials and executives convinced it was Maitreya? According to Ben, they were. But did they go to the Queen and the Queen check with the church and the church say what they said? It's not a stretch for that to happen. I just don't remember reading that anywhere that was the case. But let's say it was the case. They don't have to believe it. You know what I mean? The archbishops of the Church of England don't have to believe this information. Most of those people in those positions feel that they're cut above everybody else, that they have an ego. They have an ego. And they're very arrogant about what they're standing in their community or the world or whatever. And it doesn't seem like much of a stretch for somebody in that position to say, well, of course, if this was real, they'd come to us, not them. Why would they go to the news? They would come to the church. Because that's what people think the return of the Christ would do. It has to do with the church. It doesn't. It has to do with the world. Why would Maitreya go to, the media? Well, the media is our representatives. Doesn't matter how corrupt we think they are, how we don't trust them, how the former president of the United States calls them fake news. Doesn't matter. They are the way that we communicate with ourselves. They're opinionated. They're corrupt. They're bogus. They do put out fake narratives and all sorts of stuff, but it is the way that we communicate with ourselves, like it or leave it. And so, we just have to kind of put up with it for right now until that whole thing has changed. But that's the reason why Maitreya would go and talk to them, not to the church, because he's not here for the church per se. He's here for the whole world. How does the world talk to one another? By the news media. Now, the thing that I wanted to say in terms of practical standpoints, okay, so Ben said that there were people in the royal family who knew who Maitreya was, had met with Maitreya at some of his meetings and talks that he was giving in the Asian community of London in the 80s and so forth, that there were people from the royal family that went there. Was it the Queen of England? I don't know. Was it Princess Diana? I think Princess Diana, from what I understood, had met Maitreya, knew who he was. Was it just her? Was it also the then Prince Charles, now King Charles? Was it one of the other people in the royal family? I don't know. He didn't say. The ones that he said that knew who Maitreya was and worked with Maitreya in some way, asked Maitreya for his advice, for instance. He talked about George Herbert Walker Bush, asked Maitreya for his advice on what to do about Iraq. The first Iraq war, Maitreya said that the best thing to do would be to offer them aid, that apparently Saddam Hussein was trying to find a way to get out of Kuwait, and to offer them an aid package and those kind of things, and that would ameliorate the problem. And then George Herbert Walker Bush chose not to do it. But he did send an envoy to England to ask him. Yasser Arafat was another world leader that had spoken to Maitreya and asked him his advice on what to do when the Zionists in Israel were making offers for their so-called peace plans with the Palestinians and offering them land. And every single time Maitreya told them not to take what they were giving, because what they were giving was already unjust and it wouldn't last. They needed to have a just settlement to that situation. Another Middle Eastern player that had asked Maitreya for advice, or Maitreya had come to him actually and asked him if he would do it, was the former King Hussein of Jordan. And Maitreya asked him if he would give some of his land to the Palestinians, which he did. And then the Israelis came and took it back, took all that land that he was offering to them. So, and then, of course, Willy Brandt, very famous in his own right because he was the former Chancellor of Germany and those kind of things, worked with Maitreya to come up with the not the Marshall Plan, with the Brandt Report. And you can read about it online. It's really an economic blueprint for the principle of sharing. But that all came under the inspiration of Maitreya directly working with Willy Brandt, not long after he entered London. But those are the ones that he talked about. But he did say that there were other world leaders and well-known people and those kind of things, probably well-known celebrities who had met Maitreya and know who Maitreya is. Now, why would they not be talking about this information? That's the other reason why I wanted to talk about, and I want to bring something a little bit more practical into the discussion, okay? Well, is the reason why somebody like the Pope, if he knows who these masters are, which I do think that the Pope does know who Maitreya and the Master Jesus are, just guessing, but let's say he knew who they were for sure, or the Queen of England, or Princess Diana when she was alive, or Yasser Arafat, or whoever, right? Or any celebrity that has met Maitreya, or world leader who has already met Maitreya and knows who he is totally convinced who he is, and is working with him in some way. Why would they not be coming out and talking about it? Well, for one, Maitreya had already told some of these individuals not to talk about him. Now, why would he do that? Okay, so it has to do with free will. And most people who are hearing this information for the first time or don't know much about this information, maybe have heard that term before, but don't know much about it. These masters don't infringe upon anybody's free will ever. We do it all the time because we don't know to not do it. And in so doing, we harm others when we do it. But so the reason why Maitreya is on TV and not mentioning who he is and just being introduced as an ordinary person is so that it doesn't infringe upon people's free will. The reason why that the Queen of England, if she did know, and she was asked by Maitreya not to, I'm not saying that she did know, I'm just talking about it hypothetically, and if she did know about it, Maitreya would ask her not to talk about it with anybody, because if the Queen of England did say something about it, there would be millions upon millions of people all over the world, and in England and all over the world, who would believe it just based on what the Queen of England was saying, or Princess Diana, or Yasser Arafat if they were more, Middle Eastern or whatever like that. They would believe it just based on that. Just the same reason why Maitreya is not being introduced as Maitreya, or the reappearance of the Christ, or the Imam Mahdi, or whatever, because there would be people who would believe it based on that, and they wouldn't do anything with it, even if they did believe it. He wants to speak to people heart to heart, so that the listener, when they hear what he has to say, can believe it on whatever the level they believe it, or not. So if they believe 25% of what he's saying, they can say, yeah, I get some of it, but I don't agree with everything. But would they say that to themselves or out loud, even if they were told that was the Christ come back? Or if they were told by the President of the United States, or some world leader, or somebody of international note that was Maitreya, would they be honest enough to be able to say that? Or would they just go along with it because everybody else is going along with it? You see what I'm saying? So nothing really would get done. So that's why they would never do that. Now, the other thing, too, I think, in terms of the practicality of what you're asking, did they turn their back on the second coming? This is what I want to talk about. It's not so much about the Queen, the BBC officials, or the archbishops. It doesn't matter what they do with it. It doesn't, well, maybe the BBC, but it doesn't matter what these archbishops believe. They have their own ideology that they follow. They have their own ego, their own perception on everybody, and those kind of things. And it doesn't really matter what they believe. It doesn't really even matter what the Queen believes, really, to be honest, when she was alive, if she knew about this information. But are we turning our back on this information? Are we turning our back on the problems of humanity? Are we turning our back on the hungry of the world? And this is a question that you can only ask for yourself. I'm not pointing my finger at you. I'll put myself in this boat, there were years that I didn't do anything with this information. and or not much, or wanted to do more but didn't, or whatever, right? I turned my back on it too. We all have. But it's for each and every one of us to do something about, if you believe in it. If you believe that Maitreya is who he is, on whatever level, talk about it with people on that level. Don't hold back. You don't have to tell everybody, and you don't have to tell total strangers at the store, but if they're talking about something and those kind of things, and you want to interject this, then interject it. You'd be surprised how people react. And I'm not just saying this to you, I'm saying this to everybody. But justice and peace don't happen on its own. We have to do something about it, right? And that's where I think, in terms of your question and in terms of the question that this article was posing, that is the most important thing. What are we as a humanity doing? Not our world leaders. It doesn't matter what they're doing. We know, even Maitreya says, we are ahead of our world leaders anyway, in terms of the desire for peace, the desire for justice, the longing for unity, the longing to end hunger and those kind of things. We are ahead of our world leaders already. So why do we need them to do anything? We need to start doing something about it. You see what I'm saying? As a whole, as a humanity. But I am really excited, Will, that you sent me that article. Thank you so much. I hope you guys read it. Like I said, you can do it one of two ways. You can either click on the link in the post. If you click on the link in the post, then definitely go to the Facebook page. It will be up there too. I love you guys. Thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys real soon. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.